Welcome back to the Chosen Life podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hacohen from Kormans.ca law firm, and co-hosting with me this week and for the next several weeks, actually, one of our associate lawyers, Faizan. Faizan, say hello.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
So we're going to have a lot of fun today because it appears that we have one guest. We're actually having two guests today. So I'm going to make sure I got this right. Mr. Joe Horneck, Ward 6, Mississauga City Councillor.
You got it.
So that's one guest. And then Extra Fun Joe is a second guest. So he's wearing different hats. We just don't know which hat he's always wearing. So Joe, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
So are we getting Ward 6 City Councillor or are we getting Extra Fun Joe?
Well, we'll see where the topics lead us, right? And, you're right. Like there's a certain persona you kind of have for your public facing things. And there's a certain persona you have, your dad face at home, your buddy face at home. So we'll see where we go with this.
We already have a kinship on. We were talking off the air. So first of all, I don't know if you realize we have the same initials. We got the JH thing going.
True.
Yeah.
Good observation.
My older brother, who basically raised me like a dad, his name is Joseph, Joe. So
Okay.
got that as well. Is it Joseph or Joe?
I go by. So it's a funny little fact.
Yes.
When I was in banking, I have a baby face and people never believed my age. And I rose very quickly in the banking world. And so people would look at me. And so I'd try to kind of hide that by going by the more formal Joseph. But really, I'm always just Joe.
But the birth certificate says Joseph.
That's true.
So why do I wear the beard?
We all know him, Joe.
We know him as Joe because he's fun Joe, extra fun Joe.
See, I would buy your gray hairs off because
Yeah.
honestly, like too much of a discount on age here.
I'll tell you where the beard actually started if you're curious. So actually starting to practice as an associate lawyer, get called to the bar in 02 and it's around 05, 06. And nobody's taking me seriously because I have a real baby face. Like people think I'm like 15 at this point. So I'm thinking in my head, okay, I'm going on a 2-week vacation. Maybe I don't shave for the 2-week vacation, see how it goes.
Yeah.
Come back, got this beard going for 2 weeks. And partners of the law firm, I love the beard. This is great. You need to keep the beard. Trust me about the beard. And so all of a sudden I start practicing with clients. They ask me a question. Let me think about that for a moment. And they're like, whoa, he's stroking his beard. He must be intelligent if he's got a beard. And so that's where the whole beard persona came up. So I can appreciate the baby face aspect.
Yeah.
But also it makes him more approachable. And I see you with the baby face, it's more fun. You see the beard, like, oh, scary lawyer, I got to stay away.
Well, they do say in politics that people with beards are seen as less trustworthy. So they usually encourage politicians to shave them.
If I was going to politics, I would shave tomorrow. I agree. But I'll tell you what else I'd be doing if I was Ward 6 Mississauga City Councillor. I'd have cufflinks, and they would say JH6. I'd have a private jet, JH6. I'd be using JH6 everywhere. People would know me as Ward 6 guy. Do we have anywhere on our house, on our private jet, JH6?
I'm not a private jet kind of guy. Not counselors don't get paid that well. Coming into this job, I actually took a pretty substantial cut to salary because for me, it was about changing your lifestyle and doing something you're passionate about, right?
I didn't see any helicopter landing pads either. So at the
Boy, no.
city office here. So we actually are in the city office, right? We got a nice tour of where the magic happens, the councillor meeting room and the hall. It's very impressive. Honestly, I felt like I was like in the UN, like it's that level. When you walk into the room and you're with the other councillors, with the mayor, you got to feel like the magic's happening. Like this is a unique spot, and wow, like we are doing some really good work here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about what does a city hall mean, right? When you build something like a city hall, it should last literally 100 years, right? It should speak to the future of the city as well, right? So when we were showing off Mississauga City Hall, especially the city council chambers, they were really ambitious at the time. Like when that was constructed, the city was maybe 250, 300,000 people. And, you look at it now and you're like, this is for an actual real city who thought ambitiously about things. And by the way, we also had a lot of, development charges coming through the door at the time. So we could afford to build something ambitious. And, if you had to construct that today, people would kind of probably balk at the cost of that, I think.
Yeah, take a lot of money out there.
Yeah. But, the city was at a different point in time, right? Where there's a lot of farmers' fields. We were filling it up rapidly with housing. And so, money was coming in a lot easier than it is doing today. Now we have the opposite problem, right? We have all that infrastructure to maintain.
Yeah.
And that's very expensive. Making pipes bigger because we got more rainfall. There's more things that are paved. These are the things that aren't necessarily fun, but need to happen in this city.
I got to say, if you're a resident of the city of Mississauga, come check out the square here. It's incredible. Like right now, they're building a whole street festival, and you got the sound stage there. And come into the building, check out City Hall. It's really, really nice here. It's really well designed. And come to the meetings. Come hang out with Joe and the other counselors and get to hear what they do. One of the things we were talking about off the air was you live in the city. You may have issues at times. Come and express your voice. Every voice counts, right?
Yeah. And this is the level of government where you can really do it, which is why I found it really attractive. Like people will say to me, Joe, what about federal or provincial? And I really don't have any interest in it because I like the tangibility of the issues at City Hall, but I like the fact that we're the most accessible level of government. Anyone can walk into any meeting and say, I have an opinion and I get a chance to say something, right?
Good or bad doesn't make a difference as long as
That's
you
right.
come and show up
Yep.
and
But
have opinion.
And I think to your point, like Jonathan, like who shows up matters. There's a lot of times, especially when you look at something like the city budget, which is what we're going to do for an entire year on every single subject matter. And, people who want to see changes can come and lobby for those changes. But oftentimes people don't take that time. Before I was a counselor, I would actually take a day off work. Maybe this is a little bit sad, to be honest. But I would actually take a day off work in the budget session and I would come and sit there.
Yeah.
And it was myself. It was Brad Budd, who's also a counselor now, who worked for the Board of Trade, and then one other fine English fellow from the south of Mississauga who, is kind of very opinionated about a lot of things. And the three of us would be the entirety of the audience for 800,000 people in the city. And that would be it. And in some ways, you're like, that's kind of sad that people aren't more engaged because there's no barrier to entry. There's no security. You can just walk in and say, I have an opinion.
And that takes us to the point that maybe if someone wants to make an opinion or just come and have an experience of the city council meetings, they can get in touch with your office and, you can help them know for the dates when they can come and see.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, like even just thinking about the city budget right now, it's June and people have gotten their tax bills recently and some people are frustrated,
Yep.
right? Tax increase was more than they expected. And, I feel like, I need you to be involved at the times that is more appropriate, right? We have whole public consultation sessions. If you have an opinion, I need you to come and actually reinforce that opinion and say what that is. Because if people are coming to us and saying, I need more snow clearing, I need more leaf coverage, I need more programs for seniors, that is what counselors listen to. If somebody never comes and says, actually, guys, my tax bill was way too high this year, I need you to restrain things. Well, nobody comes and makes that argument, and then we don't go that way. I make a lot of amendments,
Yeah.
but, they don't go through if there's no public to support that idea.
I wonder if anybody ever comes and says, you know what, my property tax bill is too low. I feel like I should be paying more. Where can I donate more money for property taxes? I don't think that probably has ever happened in the history of anywhere.
Has it ever happened, Joe?
No, I don't remember that. But I mean, I think, you also challenge people like, well, what service would you get rid of? You don't like libraries? You don't want water coming out of your taps? You don't want garbage? Like the things that we give people are very tangible. They're in your life. You literally touch them every day. So to say I want less of something, it's really hard to find what that thing would be. So people kind of have to say intangibly, well, make it less. Okay, but where? What functionally do you want less of?
Yeah.
That's a challenge. And the other thing I'd say is, look, our property tax bill arrives in one set thing. You don't think about your federal provincial taxes because every time you buy a cup of coffee, it's built into that.
Right.
But I deliver one bill a year. And so you remember to the dollar what that bill costs. And you couldn't possibly tell me what your federal or provincial taxes were last year.
We'll come to that more because we have to discuss some other issues regarding home affordability and the city's work on that.
Please. Yeah.
Joel, why don't you take us back to your journey when you started doing the University of Warwick experience and then the University of Wilfrid Laurier experience?
Yeah.
How did that shape up your career and where you stand today?
I think it did shape me a lot. So I grew up in Windsor and, going to Wilfrid Laurier in Waterloo was the first time I'd kind of left home. And I think that was a really important experience in your life, right? You interact with people, you feel like an actual adult for the first time in your life. And at the time, the University of Waterloo and Laurier, like it was a much smaller place than it is today, right? It felt more intimate. So I made some really great friends, learned a lot of things. I graduated in 2001, which was not a fantastic year to hit the job market, much kind of like this year for young people. So I was able to find something for about a year and a half. I saved some money, and then I was able to go do that University of Warwick master's degree in political economy. And got me out of the country, seeing the world. My wife-to-be, because we weren't quite married yet, came with me, and we spent 3 years living in the UK. I started on a trading desk, and at that time, it's like, met people from all over the world, had an exciting, fun time in London, England, one of the great cities of the world, especially when you're in your 20s and you can stay up all night and do fun stuff. It was really formative, and it got me into the industry that really formulated my whole life, the financial industry, right? So
Did
it was totally
Did you
meaningful.
think about that while you're sitting here in your office now, that you would be sitting here one day?
I always loved politics. I don't know where I would have imagined myself sometimes, right? I mean, when I was younger, I would have gravitated to the higher levels of government. But I think as I become, more aware of myself and kind of thought about more about things, like this is the level for me.
So when you were growing up in Windsor and you're sitting at the tunnel barbecue at the time
Oh, yes.
and loading up on the tunnel,
Yeah.
which is, by the way, the first place I ever ate in Windsor. I went to go watch the Detroit Tigers game, and a buddy of mine said, this looks like a hole in the wall, but it should be good. So we go into the tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
As we're sitting in the tunnel, and now it doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but it was a landmark in Windsor. And this guy walks in and he says, I literally drove from Chicago all the way just to eat here, and I brought a cooler. I'm bringing back the ribs to Chicago.
Yes.
That's how good the Windsor Tunnel was. Like, that was the mecca of ribs, I would say.
It was. And I can tell you a little attached to politics on that. Paul Martin. So my first political job, the only one I ever got paid for before this one,
Yes.
was a summer student for Paul Martin when he was finance minister in the summer of 2000.
That's cool.
And he was a fanatic about tunnel barbecue. And, I got the privilege to have dinner with him there one time with a bunch of people, and it was a lot of fun. The second thing Windsor's famous for is pizza. You got to get Windsor pizza. That's another thing where, again, people will either talk about Windsor pizza or take it home with them.
I'll take a note of that.
And
Yes.
number three,
Oh, a third thing from Windsor? I don't know. Everything lives with those first two things for sure.
the shawarma district.
Oh, that's not bad either. Yeah, that's fair.
They
fair.
got some pretty good shawarma in Windsor. Like, you need to go eat now that the tunnel's gone. You still got the pizza and you got the shawarma. So
Yeah. Well, and that's something that's kind of come, I think, more in the last 20 years when I haven't lived in the city. But you're right. Like, that's really something that's grown on the city as the population's changed, right?
So growing up there, as Fizan was mentioning, so the politics itch was already there within you before even university.
I like, I always had an idea about politics. And, I remember the first time I ever went out to do anything was just hammering in some signs in the 1997 election. I mean, I didn't know anything, right? It was in high school. It was more when I went to university, and especially at Wilfrid Laurier, where I kind of made that connection to actually getting involved with things. And then, I worked my tail off on the local stuff, and Mr. Martin offered me a job in the office that summer. And, it kind of set me on the interest side. But then again, my career went a whole different way, right? I actually got into finance and business, and that was also a real interest of mine.
Does that define you as a politician today?
Absolutely. The financial side, it is absolutely my key messaging, my core strength. I always like to say, like, a lot of my colleagues, they know things that I'm not familiar with. And I think a good team of any board of directors is people can come with certain specialities.
Yeah.
And for me, it's finance and governance. The things that I learned at those big banks, how to run proper teams, how to think about operations, how to think about processes, controls and audit and all that stuff is the stuff that I try to specialize in. So for me, budget, taxes, everything we're spending in our operations about how we structure things is my center of excellence for myself, right? That's what I try to really spend a lot of time on. And that's my value add to the city. Other councillors have other areas and I definitely listen to them when they speak. And I think there's a little bit of extra, leeway that I get from my fellow councillors when I speak on those topics that I'm familiar with.
I would think it's a huge advantage having spent time at BMO in the finance sector, title insurance, right? FCT, working
FCT,
and then coming to city council work. You have a clear understanding of how finances work, how budgeting works, how real estate works, the ins and outs of it. When I read the resume and I looked at LinkedIn, I think to myself, how does one go from BMO to FCT to politics? Please walk me through it.
And also State Street, which is the second largest pension fund manager at the time. Tokyo Mitsubishi. So yeah, I mean, how did I kind of get there? Like I said, I'd always had that interest. When I came to Mississauga, it was the first time I ever tried to realize that interest for myself, right? I bounced around to a number of cities when I was younger, and especially before I had a family. But I think just once I kind of hit my late 30s and early 40s, I started to see myself as what would I want to do in the financial world. Like, I was a vice president, I was a director, but I mean, it was in these very large organizations and you had leeway. And I always like to say, I remember one of my favorite, most successful years was at Bank of Montreal. And I built an application, and we saved, a couple $1 million. And I was really proud of myself for building that. And it was a lot of hard work. My boss was super happy. And then they made like $5 billion in profit. And you're like, well, I felt I was achieving a great success with a couple million, but then they made 5 billion. See, it really makes you feel very small. And here I can see you can make tangible change, right? And tangible change in your community, like things you can take pride in. And, I love talking to people. I love knocking doors. I love interacting with people. And I think that was another thing that was missing from my career. I was never a people facing person. I wasn't in sales. I wasn't in that kind of thing. I was in operations and trading and things that weren't inherently people things. And I am a people person. So that's why I like this job. It's a better fit for me in that sense.
Amazing.
And then moving to FCT and having your experience there, just connecting it with our background of real estate.
Yeah, I mean, FCT was a really great place to work in the sense of the culture that they build. I'd worked at a lot of places, and, they always would say, well, the heart and core is our people. Our people are just centric. Well, you know what? I remember I went through the financial crisis, and that was all fun and games until you weren't making any money, and then you're out the door. There's a lot of, there wasn't a lot of mercy shown in the capital markets banking side. FCT, I really feel, did have a great corporate culture, though. They really did care about their employees in a way that they demonstrated on a regular basis, and they took that employee input into a lot of the things they did in a way that I hadn't seen in the more corporate affairs. So, it was a really interesting place. And, title insurance is something that I think people maybe don't appreciate how important it can be. And until, honestly, something goes badly. Yeah. I think most of insurance is like that, right? You deeply regret it if you didn't have it.
Yeah.
But when you hear that somebody bought a piece of property and the property lines weren't what they expected, that's a real mess up. And, title insurance can help you on these things.
True.
But people I know that are in the banking sector, very often they come in and they're saying, I want to be a VP one day. I want to be able to run a department, in title insurance. Eventually, I want to be an executive. There's all sorts of directions people can go, including when they move over to politics. And ultimately, there's different levels. Obviously, you touched upon it. Ultimately, you could have gone federal, you could have gone provincial, could have gone municipal. You chose Mississauga. You chose, even though growing up in Windsor. And Vizana were asking talk about the questions. Got to know why Mississauga, why Ward 6. How did you end up in Mississauga?
That's a very important one, because
for sure,
how you ended up with this choice is maybe a game changer for many who would be following up maybe 10, 15 years later.
Well, so I think where I was coming from before Mississauga was Montreal, and I was running a team in Montreal, and I also had a team in India. So I was 24/7, and we had our son, my oldest son, Alex. And, we're just we don't have any family connection in Montreal, and we need something more. And so when we looked about coming back to the GTA, changing jobs and doing that, my wife was finishing up her PhD as well, where we want to live. And for me, I looked around the GTA and I said, Mississauga looks like the place that I want to raise a family. It seems very family centric. It looks like it's got great community centers and great libraries, and it's Toronto adjacent. So I don't have the kind of positive chaos sometimes, but sometimes negative chaos of Toronto, right? It was more affordable when I came here, that you could purchase a home and it was a sizable home. And you're like, I've got a little bit of a backyard. I'm on a pleasant street. This is a place I can raise my family, and I'm going to have a really good life in that sense. And I think, that's the thing that we're challenged now about. That affordability has slipped away. It's not even slipping. It has slipped. It's gone. Yeah. Especially for people in their 20s and 30s. I don't know how, despite being a VP at a major pension fund, I could have afforded my house today when I was in my 30s moving to Mississauga.
Right.
I couldn't have done it, And my wife was doing her PhD, so she was finishing up her education. She didn't have a job to qualify for the mortgage. So how would we have done that? And two people who have a master's degree and PhD can't afford a home?
Yeah.
That's rough.
I grew up since the 70s. I'm turning 50 next year, so I'm getting there. And I remember Mississauga and coming to Square One as a smaller mall around the fields. There were a lot of farm fields everywhere.
Yeah.
Not all these towers. There's no Marilyn Monroe towers at the time.
Yeah.
No M towers. And man, this place has grown over the past few decades. It's absolutely exploded. And if you had come in the 70s, you came today, you wouldn't recognize the city.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a real interesting point right now that's happening in Mississauga politics as well. Are we a city or are we a suburb? And even 10 years ago, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
you would have said, we're a suburb, like, yeah, we've got businesses, we do this, but we're a suburb inherently. Now you're right. You look around, you're like, how can you call yourself a suburb when you're going to have a 72-story building? That's not a suburb.
No.
That's going to be the largest building outside of Toronto in all of Canada.
Right.
You are not a suburb. But if you go into our historical neighborhoods, those single detached neighborhoods, and you ask that same question, especially to long-term residents, they'll say, yeah, I moved here. It's a suburb. I wanted that family lifestyle that I just talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And so I'm not comfortable all the time with a lot of the changes that are happening in the city. I don't particularly want to see basement apartments or more of a transit system because I drive everywhere. Development's okay, but I want it to happen around square one, and that's it. So, you have these tensions with the city, and obviously I'm shorthanding the thoughts of many, many thousands of people who have much more diverse views. But there is that tension. Are we a city? Are we a suburb? And that's my Occam razor question to people. Because if you say suburb, I can probably predict where you are on a lot of questions. If you say city, I can also probably predict where you are on a lot of questions. I can also probably predict how old you are or what your background would be ethnically. Again, people don't fall into easy categories for sure.
Yep.
But there is a trend, there is a tendency.
So 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I came to Canada, this is the only city I came and lived, and I didn't move away from here because the vibe of it just, gripped me in that time. But there was no these constructions everywhere. It was Square One was just like the park that we have down here. The water park was still not there. We used to do the skating rink.
Yeah.
And there was not a lot of issues with parking.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not what it is now, as you've mentioned yourself. My question is, how do you define it to yourself today? Because you see cities and towns around like Milton, Oakville, even Culloden growing up.
Yep.
What do you see about Mississauga? What do you see about your own ward and your own work here in Mississauga?
Yeah, I think the thing you always got to remember is no city ever stays the same. It's always constantly evolving, right? You could think about the industrial Rust Belt cities in the States, and those are cities in decline. We're the opposite. We're a city that's always growing. We're always taking in more people. And so we're going to be growing up because there's no more growing out anymore.
Yeah.
That's not possible. How many single detached houses are we ever going to build? None, because there's no more space. So we're always going to be building up. And then there's all those tensions around those services that are going to make that happen. So having a good bus service, a bus service when we were building the city fresh from green space, it's an afterthought. Who takes the bus? A bunch of students. Now people take the bus either because they have to or because it actually is more convenient to them, depending on where they're going. So it's a total rethink.
Especially if you're on a Ontario line.
Of course, right? Or even just, Derry Road, Burnenthorpe, Eglinton, Dundas. These are places where you got very frequent service. You could step on and step off and not be that inconvenienced, especially if you live on that street. So, we're rethinking the city all the time. And no city ever stays stagnant. It's never going to be that. But as a human nature, I think we always think about, well, when I moved here, it was like this, as you just described.
Yep.
And so any tensions that have come from the day I came till the day now, you're going to think, wow, that's a decline over what I expected. But somebody in a Rust Belt city where the jobs have been emptied out would say, well, that's a decline in a totally different way.
Right.
Cities never stay the same. They're always evolving. And you can't mentally lock it in as of the day you showed up.
Right.
Cities never stay the same. They constantly evolve. You see the city today. That's a snapshot of the city today. What's going to look like tomorrow, next year. It's on that note. We got 10 million questions for you, Joe. So with your permission, we're going to pause now.
Yeah.
Come back next week. Prepare a whole new list of questions for you. Rapid fire. And we got to pick your brain a little more because, man, you're a fountain of information in Mississauga. We good to go?
Sounds great.
All right.
Thank you.
Fizan, Jonathan, that's Joe Horneck.
Thank you.
Extra fun guy. And we'll be back next week. Joe's Life Podcast.